Revenge films.
My name is Jonathan. I'm 26 years old and still single. Actually, I'm recently single. Until 1 year ago, I had a girlfriend that I was seriously dating. We were engaged, and just before our wedding, she disappeared. I met my ex-fiancée, Helen, when I started working at my company. We were introduced through a mutual friend, and 1 year after we started dating, I proposed and we became engaged. I had no idea why she left me or what happened, nor was I ever able to find out the reason, and it took me a long time to get back on my feet after that. I thought that maybe she was caught up in some accident, and I was so worried that I even called her parents. But the only thing that they said to me was,
"I'm very sorry for troubling you, because our daughter is a spoiled brat."
I tried to ask them multiple times that if there was anything that they knew, please just tell me the truth. But in the end, they didn't give me any information and continued to avoid my questions. After I continued to contact them to try to ask over and over again, I was at least able to find out that she wasn't in an accident, nor was she sick, but that Helen was healthy and very much still alive. And then, 1 year after all of that, I still had feelings for Helen, and I couldn't bring myself to begin a new relationship with another woman. I was feeling really down. But the people that cheered me up during that time were my best friends from high school. Even after we all graduated from college and became working adults, we all met up with each other from time to catch up. When they all found out about my heartbreak, in order to try to cheer me up, they arranged happy hour gatherings once a week, and it really saved me. Thanks to them, I was finally able to regain my energy and get back on my feet. That is, until one day when I received a wedding invitation in the mail. The invitation was from a friend of mine from high school named Kevin. Currently, he was living out of state and working at a company down south. That week, the same group of friends were gathered for our weekly happy hour, and since we had all received the invitations, we decided to video call him so that we could congratulate him together. Kevin picked up, and when we told him how happy we were for him, he was thrilled. And then one of my friends asked him what kind of person he was going to marry and what she was like. And Kevin said that she was a shy and really cute woman. At that very moment, I was reminded of Helen, and I felt a slight pain in my heart. And then Kevin continued to tell us that his bride-to-be was a shy person and not that good at meeting new people, and that she was being difficult about even letting Kevin invite his friends from high school to the wedding. And for that reason, he said that he actually hadn't told his fiancée that we were going to be attending the wedding. But he assured us that before the day of the ceremony, he would make sure to talk to her about it. No matter how shy she might be, I thought it was strange that a woman would tell her fiancé not to invite his friends from high school to the wedding, and I thought that was quite bratty of her. But then, a couple of months later, it was the day of the wedding. Early in the morning, my friends and I got on the bullet train and headed down south. When we arrived at the wedding venue, there were a lot of people there, from family members to friends of the groom. However, I realized something strange, and that was that I didn't see a single person on the bride's side of the family, or any of her friends. But first things first, we decided that we should go and congratulate Kevin in person, and we were all really excited to see him for the first time in a while as well. And so we headed towards the groom's dressing room. When we knocked on the door, Kevin opened up with a big smile on his face. As soon as he saw us, he gave us all a big hug. We were all so happy to be reunited for the first time in years. And then he said that he could finally introduce us to his bride, and he turned towards the back of the dressing room and called out a certain name.
Hey, Helen! My friends from high school are here. I want to introduce you to them. Come out here.
When I heard the name Helen, a small part of me thought, what would the odds be? But I continued to tell myself that there would be no way that it would be my ex-fiancée. Or so I thought. But when I looked up at the person who was walking towards us, it was in fact none other than my ex-fiancée, Helen. I was so shocked that I thought I might faint, but my friends also recognized the situation, and one of them came over to support me. Kevin saw me go pale, and he had a confused look on his face as he was looking back and forth between Helen and myself and asking us,
What's the matter? Do you know each other?
But Helen looked away with an awkward look on her face, and without saying another word, she said she needed to continue preparing for the wedding and ran back to the back of the dressing room. I just wanted to get to the bottom of the truth, so I asked Kevin how the two of them met. He told me that they first met through a DM on social media from Helen to Kevin. Kevin said that he received a message from Helen out of the blue, and as they continued exchanging messages, they got to know each other better and eventually started dating. When he asked Helen why she suddenly sent him a DM, he said that she brushed it off, just saying that she happened to come across his account by coincidence. At that very moment, I remembered a certain thing. Shortly before Helen disappeared during our engagement, I had been browsing through my social media when Helen was sitting next to me, and she suddenly said,
I want to see what your friends look like, Jonathan. Can I look?
When I handed her my phone, Helen was looking so closely at my social media down to every last corner that it was strange, and that incident had stuck with me for some time. That was when I realized that there was no doubt that Helen must have found Kevin when looking at my social media, and that was why she reached out to him. But why on earth would she do something like that? If she was dissatisfied with something about me, she could have just spoken to me about it directly. And yet instead she left me and disappeared immediately before our wedding. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. After walking away from the dressing rooms, I thought I should go and wash my face and try to freshen up, and I headed towards the bathroom by myself. When I came out of the restroom, standing there was Helen. I was so shocked that I was at a loss for words, but then Helen said to me,
I need to talk to you.
And then she made me walk with her to the bottom of the staircase where nobody else was around. And then Helen said to me,
Don't tell anybody that you and I were engaged.
And she tried to keep me from talking. But I responded that I wanted her to at least tell me the reason why she disappeared before I make that promise. When Helen started to become angry with me, she seemed to lose her temper as she said,
Isn't that obvious? That's because Kevin had way more money than you, Jonathan.
I couldn't believe my ears. When she saw Kevin on my social media, she must have thought that he had a better life than me, a regular salaryman, because Kevin was a freelance photographer. And then she DM'd Kevin, and without saying a word to me, she flew down south to go and be with him. But when her family found out about it, they were furious with her, and she said that she became estranged from her family, and that was why not one of her family or relatives were at the wedding today. Her reasoning was so unbelievably selfish that on one hand, I was beyond angry, but on the other hand, I was happy to finally know her true nature. I thought that Helen was a shy and sweet girl, but that wasn't the case, and all of the feelings that I had left towards her disappeared in an instant. When I found out that she only chose Kevin because she was after his money, I knew for certain that this marriage wasn't going to go well. When the wedding ceremony began, just as Helen had told me, I didn't tell anybody that I was her former fiancé, and I congratulated them without any look on my face. But then, in the middle of the wedding reception, Kevin announced that he had a surprise, which was to read Helen a letter that he wrote to her. When he got up on stage, Kevin began reading his feelings of gratitude towards Helen. And then, as he got towards the end of the letter, he then said,
"And now we're going to get into the real point."
And a cheeky smile came across his face. Everybody was wondering what he was going to say, but much to all of our surprise, Kevin said,
"Starting next month, I'm going to go on a trip all around the world."
And he made this shocking declaration. However, the only person that was truly shocked was Helen. And all of the family and friends that were at the venue rolled their eyes. Kevin had always been a free spirit, and everybody knew that all of the money that he had earned being a freelance photographer, he would spend down to the last penny on vacations overseas. That was a regular routine. But his family and friends knew that once Kevin set his mind to something, he wouldn't listen to what anybody else had to say. And so every single time that he would say he was going on another overseas trip, we wouldn't say anything and simply wish him all the best on his way. So I can only imagine that nobody would be able to stop Kevin this time either. When he finished reading his letter, Helen had gone completely pale, and we all heard her say,
Are you kidding me? This must be a joke.
And then she grabbed Kevin by the shoulders and was shaking him.
What do you mean you're going on a trip around the world 1 month after we got married? That's ridiculous. What's going to happen to my living expenses? If I can't become a full-time housewife, I am not getting married.
Helen was throwing a tantrum, and in response, Kevin simply said,
"Surely you can earn your own living expenses yourself, can't you?"
Helen was furious by this point and throwing a tantrum in front of everybody, but Kevin continued,
"If you want to become a full-time housewife, then you should have married an elite company employee, somebody more like Jonathan."
When he said that, Helen's jaw dropped to the ground. Then she looked over at me and muttered,
What do you mean, an elite company employee?
What Helen didn't know was that after she disappeared, I was so devastated that I put my all into my work. And eventually, as a result, I was headhunted by a major company that everybody in this country knew about. The moment that Helen found out about that, she went quiet, and she turned to Kevin and said,
Let's call off the wedding and call off our marriage as well.
Kevin seemed confused as to why this was happening all of a sudden, and even though he seemed flustered, he simply said,
"Do whatever you want."
All of a sudden, things had taken such a turn, and the entire wedding was called off, and my friends and I went back home at a loss for words. But then, once we got back home, one day when I came home after work, standing outside of my apartment was Helen. I tried to ignore her and walk into the apartment when she grabbed me by the arm and said,
Wait, Jonathan!
And then Helen said that she wanted to start over with me and put everything with Kevin in the past. But I immediately declined. But then Helen started begging me.
It has to be you. You're the only one for me, Jonathan. Please, you have to marry me.
She was starting to become so persistent that I shut her down immediately. I told her that I was going to collect a settlement fee from her for cheating on me with my friend during our engagement, and for being the cause of our wedding being canceled. When I said that, Helen panicked and she tried to run away on the spot. But now that I knew that she was back in my hometown, I immediately hired a lawyer and I collected that settlement fee from her. After Helen had to pay that settlement fee, I never had to see her ever again, and she didn't try to come near me either. According to the rumors that I heard, Helen was officially disowned by her family. And these days she's working as an escort in a lounge while messing around with multiple men. As for Kevin, he did in fact go on his trip around the world, and he didn't come back for some time. After everything that happened, I opened up to him about my past with Helen. He then apologized to me that even though he didn't know about it, he did something terrible to me. But thanks to that, there was no bad blood between Kevin and I think he and I will still be able to continue being friends. I had my heart broken and failed at getting married once. But from now on, I hope to be able to find a woman who isn't so two-faced. And all I can do is vow that I'm never going to make the same mistake again.
My name is Tabitha. I live together with my husband, Thomas. I'm working full-time at a company, and my husband is working full-time as well. Because we're both working full-time, if I'm being honest, I wish that we could separate the chores evenly between the two of us. However, although my husband was good at his job and earning for the family, he was extremely patriarchal and refused to lift a finger towards the chores. There were a lot of times that I would feel exhausted from this lifestyle, but I had always been a pretty tough girl. So even though I had my hands full with work and the chores, I honestly wasn't that troubled by it. More than this lifestyle, there was actually something else that was the root of my stress. And that something else would be my sister-in-law, Chelsea, and her bullying of me. My sister-in-law, Chelsea, was 2 years younger than me. She was 24 years old, and even though she did get a job once, apparently that company was no good and she quit very shortly after. Currently, Chelsea is unemployed and she's living at home with her parents. Anytime that I would go to see my in-laws, my sister-in-law would always be there at home. And any time that she could find a moment where my husband or his parents couldn't hear us, she would bully me, saying things like, "You're a lazy little parasite to our family." Whenever I would ask her why she would say such awful things to me, my sister-in-law would reply, "Isn't it obvious? Because even though you have such a low salary, you're being spoiled by my brother's income, and you're a parasite that's living so lazy." It was always the same response. It was true that compared to my husband, my income was lower. However, I was making $35,000 a year, so it's not like it was nothing. If anything, I was definitely earning more than a normal housewife who just works a part-time job. Someday, if and when Thomas and I have kids, I was going to quit my current job. And at that time, I was considering getting a part-time job, but when I thought about how much my sister-in-law would bully me if I did that, it sent chills down my spine. She was really difficult to deal with. One day, my husband said that we were going to go to his parents' place on the weekend, so I had no choice but to go with him. When we arrived, my sister-in-law was grinning from ear to ear and waiting, and then she said, "I knew it. There she is. Even though we only wanted to see my brother, you didn't have to come along." Right after she said that, she whispered into my ear, You're just a bored little parasite and you're in the way, so go home. You're not welcome here. As soon as she said that, I glared at my sister-in-law, but then she put on an act and said, What? Why are you suddenly glaring at me out of nowhere? Oh, Thomas, help me. And she grabbed onto my husband's arm. Thomas immediately took her side and said,
Hey, Tabitha, why are you so mean to my sister?
He said that as if he was defending a helpless little girl instead of his grown adult sister. On that day, in any spare moment behind everybody else's backs, my sister-in-law annoyingly kept saying things like, Go home, you little parasite, you're useless. And I was so fed up with it that when we got home, I decided to try to talk to my husband about it. I told him about all of the things that she had said to me until then and the horrible attitude she had with me. But to my disbelief, my husband took his sister's side and tried to defend her. His excuse was his sister had quit her previous job because she became so stressed and depressed, and that she hadn't fully recovered yet. And that's why she was living at home, because she could only rely on her family. He then told me that there's no way that he would be able to scold his poor sister in that state, and he said all of this to me with a straight look on his face. When I heard those words, I was completely stunned. No matter how depressed she may have been in the past and what her experience may have been, that doesn't mean that she can get away with anything and with being so horrible. That's when I said, Well, in that case, I'm not going to go to your family house with you anymore, so from now on, you need to go by yourself. But when I told him that, my husband's face became twisted. He didn't seem to like it, but he reluctantly agreed. After that, since I no longer had to go to his family house with him, my stress was significantly decreased. And the fights between the two of us also decreased. I was thinking how nice it would be to continue this lifestyle, but that was when a big holiday came up. And because it was such a big family holiday, there was no way that I could get out of going to his family's house. So I had no choice but to go with my husband and show my face there. It had been about 6 months since the last time I was there, but as usual, my sister-in-law was unemployed and she was living her life at her parents' house, being spoiled by them. As soon as she saw my face, Oh, so I guess you showed up today, even though I would have been perfectly happy if you never showed up here again. Right at that moment, my father-in-law came out of the living room and he was furious.
Hey, Chelsea, what did you just say to Tabitha? How dare you speak to her like that?
My sister-in-law had an awkward look on her face, but then immediately my husband jumped in.
Why are you getting so serious? Obviously, that was just a joke, wasn't it, Chelsea?
And he quickly tried to cover for his sister. At that moment, something clicked inside of me. I was prepared to become fully estranged from my in-laws and decided that the next time she calls me a parasite, I am going to loudly complain about it. After we went to visit the family graves, we were having lunch at their family house. And just as I expected, my sister-in-law waited for moments when we were alone together and she quietly said to me, Even though you're a parasite, what makes you think you can eat the same things as us? And she grinned from ear to ear. Normally, I wouldn't say anything back and quietly listen, but this time, I decided to lecture my sister-in-law with a loud voice in front of everybody. That's enough. You need to cut it out already. Parasite? Excuse you. My annual income is $35,000. What part of that makes you think I'm a parasite? I finally exploded, and both my in-laws and my sister-in-law looked like they didn't know how to react. When I looked over at my husband, he was turning away awkwardly and pretending like he wasn't sitting there. But then... Why are you lying? You're only working a part-time job, and you're only earning enough to have a little allowance for yourself. My brother is paying for all of the living expenses, isn't he? I already know everything, so don't try to lie about it. She was saying things that were so far from the truth that I was shocked. And then she continued. And yet, I can't believe you're making my brother do all of the chores around the house. You are seriously the worst. So obviously, it makes sense to call you a parasite because that's exactly what you are. My sister-in-law then turned to her parents to try to get sympathy. My mother-in-law said, We have heard all kinds of things from Thomas, so I suppose it's understandable to be called that given your situation. And she actually agreed with Chelsea. I turned to my husband once again and I quietly asked him what this was all about. He was fumbling with his words and then said,
Well, if I told people that my wife was also working full-time, then it's obviously gonna hurt my pride because they'll think I'm not earning enough.
But when my father-in-law heard that, he was livid. He demanded that Thomas explain everything to them in truth, and my husband finally admitted that he had been lying to them all this time. When his family found out that I was working full-time at a company and that I was also doing all of the chores around the house by myself, my sister-in-law went quiet because this was definitely not part of her plan. When my father-in-law told my husband and his sister to apologize to me, my mother-in-law shockingly said, "But Tabitha should take some responsibility because she wasn't able to support her husband, right?" As soon as she said that, my father-in-law raised his voice.
You better keep your mouth shut. Now hurry up and apologize. Those are the only words I want to hear.
And then he made my husband and his sister stand up on the spot. When I saw the two of them apologize so reluctantly, it was crystal clear that they didn't have any regret over what they had said or done. That's when I chimed in. "Ma'am, you just told me that I'm taking actions that are understandable to be called a parasite, didn't you? But even if I was only working a part-time job and not earning that much money, to turn to somebody and call them a parasite to their face, I don't think anybody would ever forgive you for that." I spoke like I was already over it, and everybody went silent. When I found out that my husband had been lying to his family about me, I was so sad. It almost felt like all of my hard work until now had been in vain, and I also knew that at that moment, I could no longer live with my husband. I grabbed my purse, and on my way out, I simply said, "I can't live with you anymore. I'm leaving you." And I walked out of his family home. My husband came chasing after me.
Oh, come on, spare me a divorce over something this small. That was my bad. I swear I'm not gonna lie anymore.
But I had already had enough. Seriously, I hate you so much that I don't even want to look at your face anymore, so don't come near me ever again. I left my husband there and jumped into the car and drove off. The next day I received a phone call from my father-in-law.
Tabitha, I'm sorry to ask this, but please just forgive him this time. After you left, I lectured all three of them, and they all felt really sorry about how they treated you.
But that wasn't going to change how I felt. The next day, I went to get divorce papers and immediately filled them in. As the divorce was decided, my father-in-law suggested that instead of paying a settlement fee, we wouldn't hold a separation of assets, and that I would be receiving all of the savings that we had collected as a married couple. Thanks to that, I was able to move out quickly and have a fresh start in a new apartment, so I am grateful to my father-in-law for that. 1 year after my divorce, when I walked out of my office after work one day, standing outside of the door was my ex-sister-in-law. I tried to walk past her and ignore her, but then my ex-sister-in-law came over to me and stopped me. She then said to me, "I'm truly sorry for what I said to you back then." And with tears in her eyes, she was apologizing to me. She then went on to tell me that at that time she had quit her job and was feeling a lot of stress about her future. She didn't have the courage to try to go out and find a new job, and she was really suffering. And while she was going through such a difficult time, she couldn't stand that I was just working a part-time job and having my husband fully support my life. However, apparently she recently started working part-time at a convenience store. Even though she was only working part-time, she realized that it was still hard work, and she said that she finally understood through experience that there is no job that's that easy. Even though her misunderstanding came out of lies that my ex-husband was telling her, she said that now she truly regrets making fun of any part-time job and for calling me a parasite. But this time, my ex-sister-in-law was sobbing. I wasn't so open-hearted that I was willing to forgive her immediately, but at the very least, I was able to genuinely accept her sincere apology. As for what happened to my ex-husband after that, he was also a disaster. After the divorce and I moved out, there was nobody around to take care of his chores anymore. Now, I heard that he's living in a house that's become a complete dumpster, and that he's living surrounded by trash every day. Because of that, his reputation at work severely declined, and he was taken off his path to get a promotion. Nobody wanted to go near him at work anymore, and he ended up resigning. He was trying to look for a good company to join, but no company was willing to hire him in that state, and eventually he ran out of money. Currently, I heard that he became depressed, and he's going through treatments for that. On the other hand, as for me, I was able to focus on my job more, and I got a promotion and an increased salary. My life went back into order, and so I am fully enjoying my single life, going on long-term international holidays and treating myself. Now that I was finally able to cut off all ties with my patriarchal ex-husband, I was finally free. From now on, for a while now, I think I'd like to enjoy my life alone like this, living freely and fully for myself. My name is Natalie. 3 years ago, at the time, I was in my first year as a working adult at 18 years old. At the time, the guy that I was dating was a student named Michael, and he was 22 years old. Michael was very controlling. He always kept me beneath him and had a really firm grip around everything that I did. But at the time, I was stupid. I mistook his actions as love, and I thought that that's how much he loved me. The job I had worked in shifts, and normally I would be working till about 9 o'clock at night. As soon as I finished work and left the office, I would call Michael. I'm heading over there now. But if it would take me longer than an hour to get to his place, he would yell at me. And Michael knew my entire shift schedule for the week, so if I worked any overtime and was late to get to his place, he would complain a lot and lecture me.
Why are you working overtime? Do you not love me? Don't you want to spend time with your boyfriend?
Of course I love you, but ever since I started working at this company, because of my work, sometimes I have to work overtime.
That doesn't make any sense. If you had any feelings for me or how I felt, you would leave that behind and come straight to me as soon as your shift was over.
But if I were to do that and not complete my work, it would cause too much trouble for my colleagues. I could lose my job. I can't do that. Even though I would try to explain it to him, he would always be in a terrible mood, and it was a handful to try and get back on his good side. But I always thought that all of his words and actions were simply a gesture of his love. And so days like this continued, and we had been dating for about 6 months when the incident occurred. On that day after work, we had a dinner party planned that was mandatory attendance from all of the employees. Even though I had explained that situation to him before, even on the day of, Michael refused to let me go and was against my attendance. Even that morning when I was on my way to work, he told me,
"Don't go!"
And I was really troubled by what to do. However, it was my first year at that company, and I knew how important it was to maintain a good relationship at work. So I brushed off what he said, and I attended the dinner. In return, I promised him that I would come home as soon as I possibly could to his place. That evening, throughout the entire dinner party, my phone was constantly going off. He kept sending me messages that said,
"Hurry up and come home!"
And they didn't stop. The dinner lasted about 2 hours, but as soon as it was over, I jumped into a taxi to go to his place and I called him. "I'm heading over there now. I am sorry that it's this late." I knew that he was going to be in a bad mood, so I started off by immediately apologizing. But then, to my surprise, he said,
"That was a work dinner, so you didn't have a choice. It's okay. You should just go home for today and relax."
He replied to me so nicely that I was confused. But I was relieved that he wasn't in a bad mood, and so I replied, "Okay, thank you. See you tomorrow." And I hung up the phone. But then, immediately after I hung up, I thought back to everything that he had said and done to me until then, and something didn't feel right. I knew that something was off, so I decided to continue in my taxi towards his place. I think it was my female instincts that kicked in. When I arrived at his apartment, even though his car was parked in the driveway, the lights to his apartment were off. It was too early for him to be asleep, so I crept into the apartment building. I tried not to make any noises as I walked up the stairs, and when I got to his apartment, I put my ear to the door. Even though this is a time that I know he was normally awake, it was so quiet that it was even more suspicious. He had given me a spare key to his apartment, so I pulled that out of my bag and I quietly opened the door. I very carefully made my way into the apartment, and when I got to his bedroom, even though the lights in the apartment were off, right next to the bed, there was a lamp that was left on. And due to that light, I could very clearly see him fast asleep in bed with a woman I had never seen before. No matter how you looked at it, it was completely obvious that the two of them had just done the deed and were exhausted and had fallen asleep, because they were both butt naked and their clothes were on the floor. First, I decided to go and try to wake him up, but he must have been so sleepy that he wasn't thinking straight, and he said,
Huh? Oh, Natalie, welcome home.
He said to me nonchalantly. At that point, my anger had already passed its limit, and I exploded. I started to attack him. Oh, hello, Michael. So why don't you tell me, who is that person that's sleeping right next to you? When I said that, he must have immediately grasped the situation because he panicked and woke up. He started screaming. What are you doing? Who is this woman? What is going on here?
No, it's not what it looks like.
What's not what it looks like? You're obviously cheating on me. At this point, I had raised my voice and was yelling. And that was when the woman woke up, but the only noise that came out of her was, I then demanded my boyfriend not move from his spot, and I dragged the woman out of the bed. Oh, hello, nice to meet you. My name is Natalie, and who the hell are you? We go to the same college. And did you know that Michael had a girlfriend? No, I didn't know. You liar. Look at all these photos that are all around his apartment, and all of the stuffed animals and cute little presents that I got him. There is obviously no way that you didn't know. Or are your eyes just empty holes in that empty head of yours? I grabbed the stuffed animals that I could find, and I started throwing them at the woman and yelling at her. But then Michael jumped out of bed.
Natalie, calm down.
He then grabbed my arm, and just as I was about to try to push him off of me, the woman started to run away. But there was no way that I was going to let her get away, so I shoved Michael off me and I immediately went and chased after her. I was able to catch up to her on the stairs, so I grabbed her and yelled once again. Where the hell do you think you're going? Do you think you can run away? I'm not finished talking to you, so you better come right back to finish this conversation. But this time, the woman decided to fight back. This is your own fault for getting cheated on. Michael said himself that he prefers me over you anyway, so I didn't do anything wrong. When she said that, I was so furious that I raised my hand and I slapped her across the face with all of my strength. Then I grabbed her by the hair and said, Are you kidding me? That is enough. You're the one who slept with somebody else's boyfriend. Who do you think you are? When I yelled at her, the woman started to try to fight back. Her fist then came flying towards my face. But I raised my hand once again and I slapped her even harder than I did the last time. And this time she started to cry and went running down the staircase, still completely naked. After that, I went back to Michael's apartment. When I got there, he was sitting on his knees, shaking from head to toe. After you were so controlling of me and my every move, this is the result? Is this a joke? Are you kidding me?
I'm so sorry. Something got into me and...
Excuse me? Do you seriously think that you're going to be forgiven if you say words like that? Do you have any idea how much of your controlling, narcissistic behavior I have tolerated? Even today, I had to convince my boss to let me leave early instead of going with everybody after dinner, and yet this is what you were doing?
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I swear I won't ever do it again, so please forgive me.
And after that, no matter what I said to him, all he could do was apologize and keep apologizing to me, and it wasn't a conversation. I was starting to lose my patience when suddenly the doorbell rang and one of his friends walked in through the door. As it turns out, he was also friends with that girl earlier and knew about their situation. Because she ran out of here without her clothes and any of her belongings and had left it in Michael's apartment, apparently she had asked this friend to go and collect them for her. Next to the bed, I saw a purse lying there, so I asked my boyfriend if that was it. He nodded his head, so I picked up the bag and I walked over to the balcony. I threw it straight off the ledge. Both Michael and the friend were stunned. Oh, I'm so sorry. My hands must have slipped. And then I closed the door. To tell the truth, I had been playing sweet in front of my boyfriend for all this time, but with this incident of him cheating on me, my true nature came out. As soon as his friend was gone, my boyfriend sat there in silence. But some short time after that, he very quietly said under his breath that he didn't want to break up. I didn't respond and stayed quiet, but then Michael started talking about why he cheated on me. His excuse was that I was always working, and he was sad and lonely, and because he's a student, he had a lot of time alone and missed me, and that this was the first time he had ever cheated on me, and it was because he got too drunk and got carried away by the woman, and that he wanted me to forgive him. That's what he said to me, but I had already had enough, and I was ready to break up with him. Even if you were lonely, this is the only way you could deal with it? You really think that I'm going to forgive you just because you apologized to me?
I don't wanna break up. You have to forgive me, Natalie.
Listen, you keep saying that you were sad and lonely, but today, you very much had the option between me and that girl. You knew exactly what my plans were, and you would have been able to see me in just a few hours, but instead, you chose that girl. Not only that, but you went all the way with her. That says it all, doesn't it? So can you please stop acting like you're the victim, like I should feel any bit sorry for you?
Come on, please don't say that, Natalie.
Michael tried to come closer to me, so I slapped him across the face. Don't ever contact me again. Don't show your face around me ever again either. Those are my last words, and I threw the spare key at him and stormed out of his room. Of course, I immediately broke up with him. After that, I heard a rumor about that girl, the girl that ran away from me butt naked and was reported by a resident in the area that a suspicious woman was running around naked, and she was arrested. And then she called that friend and asked him to go and get her belongings from Michael's house, and he had to go and deliver it to her at the police station. Apparently, she tried to explain the situation to the police and tried to get me arrested, but she's the one that was having an affair with my boyfriend, and she was the one that decided to run away from me naked. All I did to her was slap her once or twice across the face. The police sighed, telling her that she probably deserved it after sleeping with my boyfriend, and that was the end of that. As for Michael, he contacted me multiple times that he wanted to start over with me, but I denied all of them. And, well, because I was already working, I was buying him gifts and taking him out for meals, and he was having a great time with my wallet, but there's no way I want to be with a cheating guy. After that, within 1 year, one of my colleagues at work asked me out, and we started dating. 3 years after that, he proposed, and of course I said yes. He's not controlling of me, and he's the person that doesn't even put the C in cheating. I later heard a rumor that my ex-boyfriend was two-timing some girls again, and that one of the girls was actually married, and he was sued for a really high settlement fee. But he did all this to himself. I'm just glad that I broke up with him back then. My name is Nancy. My husband and I got married when we were already in our mid-30s, and given my age, I was only able to give birth to one child. We may have wanted more, but even still, we loved our 5-year-old daughter. She was so cute. My husband was also a great person, and I couldn't have been happier with my life as a very happy family of 3. I was working full-time as a nutritionist, and my husband was also working full-time as a division manager at a company. Because we were both working full-time, our lives were pretty hectic on a daily basis. But thanks to that, we had more than enough income in our family. So twice a year, we would go on vacations together as a family, and we would also go out to eat at restaurants fairly regularly. I was really happy with my life, and we didn't have many problems. However, there was just one thing in the back of my mind that was a big concern to me, and that was my little sister's daughter, Jessica. My sister Natalie and her husband had 2 children. They were 2 daughters, and Jessica was the older one. She was 13 years old, and the younger daughter was 10 years old, named Karen. And when it came to those 2 sisters, they certainly were not treated evenly at all. Natalie and her husband were always doting on the younger daughter, Karen, and obsessed with her, completely spoiling her. On the other hand, most of the times they would leave Jessica behind. Objectively speaking, it was true that Karen was prettier, and at 10 years old, she already looked like a model with her face and proportions. Compared to that, Jessica's face was covered in acne, and it wasn't that she was necessarily overweight, but it would be difficult to say that she was anything close to a model. However, Jessica was an extremely kind girl, and she took really great care of our daughter as well. My little sister and I lived about 10 minutes away from each other by car, and because our houses were so close to each other, it was easy to go back and forth. I would get worried about Jessica frequently, and so I often went over to their house to check on her. When I would get to their house, I would see that Karen was dressed in really cute, brand new clothing, but Jessica was always wearing dirty clothes full of stains and holes. Of course, I called my sister out for it many times, but my sister refused to listen to anything I had to say. We felt so sad for Jessica that my husband and I tried to spoil her as much as we could. We would take her out to eat or try to buy things for her. That all changed one day when my sister and her family, excluding Jessica, were walking around town, and apparently Karen was scouted by a talent agency. Of course, my sister and her husband were thrilled by this, and they were on cloud 9 and celebrating. See, I knew our little girl was the cutest. With this, if she goes into the entertainment industry, she is going to become famous in no time. In the future, she is definitely going to become an idol or an actress, and our futures are going to be set. Natalie and her husband were ecstatic, but then as soon as all of this happened, my sister came over to my house and started saying the most unimaginable thing to me. Hey, Nancy, it looks like you seem to like Jessica, so you know what? You can take her. She's all yours. Excuse me? What are you saying? Jessica isn't something you can just give away. She's not even a dog or a cat. She's your daughter. Because you got married so late anyway, and you were only able to give birth to one kid, right? But you always said that you wanted to have 2 children, didn't you? So this is perfect, isn't it? You're welcome. What do you think of your own daughter? How can you possibly be trying to throw her away? She's your child. Because if people find out that Karen has a sister, one that's this fat and ugly, then it's going to completely ruin her career. This is for the sake of Karen's future. Are you kidding me? Even if you were joking, saying that you're going to give away your child is unthinkable. Natalie, you're crossing a line. I was furious with my sister's outrageous suggestion, but not long after that, my little sister started to ignore her daughter Jessica even more. As the discussion over Karen's future in the entertainment industry progressed, their treatment of Jessica became even worse. My sister said that she didn't want anybody to think of Jessica as being part of their family, and they no longer took Jessica with them anywhere that they went. She was always left at home alone. Every time that happened, I would immediately call my sister and talk some sense into her, but obviously that didn't work and her behavior didn't change. By the time I realized it, I found out that they would leave Jessica with expired store-bought lunchboxes and leave her at home alone while they went out pretending to be a family of 3. That's why every day I was so worried that I would go to my sister's house and I would bring Jessica back to my house while the rest of them were out. Because Jessica loved both me and my daughter, she was always happy when she came over to our place, and my daughter also loved it too. And also, Jessica was really smart, and she started teaching my daughter, who was about to start elementary school, how to write, and also got her ahead in math. As for me, when my sister came home, every single time we would get into a huge war about this, and this became a repeated routine. But then one day, when I went over to my sister's house because I was worried about Jessica, she was at home alone as expected, but looked even more upset than usual. When I asked her where everybody went, she said that the 3 of them went off to a trip to the agency that was in the heart of the city to sign a contract for Karen, and that they were going to be away for a few days. I can't believe this! I immediately took Jessica back to my house, and then when I explained the situation to my husband, he agreed to let Jessica stay at our house until my sister's family came back. When I called my sister, furious, she nonchalantly said that she knew I would take care of her anyway, so she knew that there wouldn't be any problems. I lost it, and I told her to come home immediately. But she answered that Karen wants to tour around the big city, so the 3 of them were going to go on a vacation for a few days and that they wouldn't be home until after they've enjoyed their trip. I was livid. I wasn't able to do anything in the end, and I was planning on yelling at her when she got home. But a few days went by without hearing a word from my sister, and then, when I finally confirmed that they came home, I took Jessica back to their house. But then my sister turned to Jessica and said, "How many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to come back here anymore? It was a big mistake that you were born to us. The only daughter that I have is Karen." She said that to Jessica's face. Of course, that was too much for Jessica to bear, and she crumpled into tears on the spot. When I saw that, I decided, all right, then I will raise Jessica. Instead of being raised by garbage parents like you, Jessica will be much happier if I raise her properly. Jessica, let's go. We're going home. Yay, finally, thank you. Goodbye, the baggage is gone. Natalie was celebrating, saying that the baggage that was Jessica was no longer on her shoulders. I couldn't believe it. After that, I brought Jessica back to my house and I apologized to my husband for making this decision without him, but I told him I didn't regret my decision and asked for his forgiveness. But then my husband went straight over to Jessica and kindly hugged her. He said to her,
You've done a great job dealing with it until now, but from now on, we are going to be family. For everything that you weren't able to say before, you can always say to us. There's anything that you need or want, tell us, okay?
And he warmly welcomed her into the family. Jessica was crying as she nodded. From there, we bought Jessica new clothes and we organized the storage room and made it into a new bedroom for her. Because my sister didn't let Jessica have any proper meals, her skin and her clothes were a disaster. But I used all of the knowledge that I had as a nutritionist, and I made meals for her that were mainly focused on managing her nutrition. And then, because she was still young, her skin that was covered in acne started to smooth out. Also, our family would often go to the sports center together, but when we started taking Jessica with us and she started playing sports, she instantly started to lose weight. Around that time, as for my sister and her family, they didn't even bother to come look at Jessica, and I didn't hear from them once. Because Karen had signed a contract with the talent agency, they packed up and had moved to the big city. But to be honest, I actually thought that that was better and I was happy about it. Because it was infuriating just to think that those garbage parents were in the same area as us. From there, the days and months passed by, and before I knew it, Jessica had become a college student. Jessica had always been smart and at the top of her class, but apparently it was even more than we had expected. She got into one of the top universities in the world after winning a scholarship from her high school. And not only that, but she graduated at the top of her class. And then, one day while at college, Jessica won the National University Pageant, and that final was being broadcast on national television. But then, to my disbelief, right after that, suddenly my sister, who I hadn't heard from in years, showed up at my door. I saw it on TV and I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe that Jessica has become this beautiful while we were away. And not only that, but that she won the Miss Universe University pageant.
That's right. Your mother and father are so proud of you, Jessica.
So anyway, that's that. So I'm gonna have you return Jessica to us now. Huh? What do you mean, huh? Because Jessica is my daughter. We were sad without her all this time, but because I felt sorry for you, Nancy, we let you take care of her until now. And plus, Jessica's going to become a judge in the future, right? Isn't that wonderful? I couldn't believe my ears, but just as I was about to blow my lid with anger, Jessica stepped in. I'm not your daughter. I don't know who you two people are, so please get out of my house. And she coldly turned her shoulder on them. My little sister started throwing a tantrum and yelling and screaming, but Jessica had already been legally adopted into our family a long time ago. So legally, it was clear that she was our daughter. And even if that wasn't the case, there is no way that we would have ever agreed to give her back to these parents regardless. I already knew that my sister and her husband saw Jessica's success and realized that they missed out. But Jessica wasn't a child anymore, and she was of the age where she can clearly state her opinion. After that, I told my sister that I am not handing Jessica over to them, and that because legally she was already our daughter, if anything were to happen to her, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police and report them immediately. They finally stormed off, looking angry. Take that. On top of all that, I later found out that even though the whole family had packed up their lives and moved into the big city, things didn't go so well for them there. Because there were already multiple other cute children at that agency, Karen didn't stand out anymore. And because her personality was so bad, nobody wanted to support her, and her career ended just like that. Right around that time was when Natalie and her husband saw Jessica on TV winning the pageant. And they must have thought that they would be able to make money off Jessica, and they came crawling back into our hometown. Seriously, both Natalie and her husband were too stupid to bear. After that, Jessica graduated from university with honors. And she was able to make her dream come true of becoming a prosecutor. Jessica became famous around our hometown for being such a beautiful prosecutor. She actually had quite a few talent agencies try to scout her, but she didn't have any interest whatsoever. Instead, she's working really hard at her job. As for my sister and her husband, they completely assumed that their daughter Karen was going to become a star. And I heard that they were spending so recklessly that they were left with quite the massive debt. But that's none of my business, nor do I care. And as for my younger daughter, she also watched Jessica grow up and looked up to her so much that she wants to become a prosecutor too, and she is studying really hard now. Our family is truly so lucky that Jessica became part of our family, and we're a happy family of 4. My name is Ashley Smith. I'm a single 24-year-old working as an administrator in a small medium enterprise. I live at home with my family, with my father, my mother, and my grandmother. Our family gets along very well. I also have a younger brother named Steven, who is 3 years younger than me. He doesn't live at home with us right now because he's in college and living in the college dorms. Then one day, we got a phone call from my little brother, saying that he was struggling with his life at college, and he wanted to come back home. Our whole family was concerned, and we were all ears, wondering what happened to Steven. According to him, he was struggling with the meals. Even though his dorm provides meals for the students in the mornings and in the evenings, he said that the amount of each meal was so small that all of the students would have to steal from each other. And that was the standard. Because Steven had never been a very strong kid, he wasn't suited for that kind of situation. He said that every day his meals were being stolen from him, and he was having to go to college hungry every day, and that it was becoming unbearable. Ever since he was a little kid, my little brother was a crybaby and a little bit spoiled. He was the type to be teased by his friends and bullied at school. And that brother of mine was going through the same experience in his college dorms. I did feel a little bit bad that because of this, he was having to go hungry every day. That being said, his college campus was over an hour away by train from our family home. The family was worried that it would be too much for him to commute to college from home, and we weren't sure what to do. However, even still, Steven said that he wanted to come and move back in at home, and we didn't stop him. Unfortunately, when my brother came back home, everything fell apart. The peaceful life that we had instantly came crumbling down. When my little brother came back from living at the dorms, he had become a different person. We were shocked at how greedy he was when it came to food. As he would walk in the door, he would say,
"I'm hungry. Is there anything in the fridge?"
He would head straight for the kitchen and open up the fridge. He would grab whatever he could get his hands on, from chicken to sausages, and immediately start scarfing it all down. After emptying the fridge, it still wasn't enough for him, and he would take snacks and juice into his room. Those would also disappear in an instant. Seeing my little brother act like this, our entire family was shocked and didn't know what to do. In the beginning, we thought that he must be hungry after starving in the college dorms for so long, so most of us turned a blind eye and let it happen. However, every single day after that, he continued this greedy behavior. He started eating off the plates of the other family members, and I started to become irritated with him. Even though I had bought a dessert for myself to eat and I wrote my name on it just in case when I placed it in the fridge, that wasn't enough. Steven ate it without even asking me, and we started getting into more fights by the day. As soon as it would become time for dinner, my little brother would come rushing home and run into the door. And then he would start putting his hands on the food that was meant for the rest of the family, and I was no longer able to turn away and started scolding him. However, even when I scolded him and raised my voice at him not to eat the food that was meant for others, my little brother refused to listen and would yell back at me. He would say,
"What's the big deal? I'm starving. Let me eat."
And he would continue eating off our plates. Not only that, but when my little brother moved back into the family home, he said that he would contribute to the household expenses, and yet, all of the money that he earned from his part-time job, he was spending on messing around with his friends, and he didn't even try to put a penny into the family. Because of my little brother, we were starting to have to spend double the amount on food, expenses, and my parents were at their wits' end. Everybody in the family was starting to be fed up with living with my little brother, and eventually my father lost his temper. He was furious and sat my brother down for a lecture.
Listen, Stephen, if you're not able to consider those around you and stop being so greedy, we're not going to be able to be with you anymore.
However, instead of listening, Stephen instead blew his temper back at our dad.
This is just as much my house as it is your house. What's so wrong with eating as much as I want whenever I want?
When he yelled that, he turned around and headed towards the family altar, and he started eating the food offerings that were on the altar, even though my father was yelling at him.
Stop that right now, Stephen! Stop it!
My brother didn't even try to stop his actions. When I tried to help my father and tell him to stop, this time Stephen turned to me and said,
Women shouldn't be eating food anyway, you fat pig!
He said such shocking words that it made me wonder if I was hearing things. His words were so immature that I was at a complete loss for words. As I stood there, stunned during that time, my brother searched every corner of the house and ate everything that he could get his hands on. That night, we decided to have a family meeting without my little brother. The four of us sat around the table and discussed what to do. My parents and I agreed on what we thought was the only option: to kick my brother out of the house. However, my grandmother disagreed. She was the only one to say we should continue to keep an eye on him, but let him stay. Her reasoning was that my little brother was never that greedy in the past, and that there were plenty of other ways to make him understand without having to kick him out immediately. She didn't want to send him back to the college dorms and make him starve, so the rest of us agreed, but we couldn't allow him to continue behaving in this way. And so the four of us decided to come up with a plan to teach my brother a lesson. First, we purchased a locked place on the fridge. Everybody besides my brother was given the code to the lock. When Stephen realized that he was no longer able to rummage through the fridge, he was furious. However, we ignored his tantrums and we moved on to the next strategy. Up until now, my mother and I had been working together to cook dinner for the whole family every day. But on this occasion, we decided to stop doing that and instead go out to eat together as a family without my brother. When it became dinner time, my brother rushed home, but he arrived to an empty house. As usual, he tried to look for any food that he could get his hands on. But you remember that he had already eaten everything, including the offerings that were on the altar, of course, so there was nothing left in the house that he could eat. After the four of us came home from having dinner outside, my little brother started to furiously yell at us.
Hey, where the hell is my food?
Stephen started throwing a tantrum at us, but I replied to him, "How about you figure it out yourself? You're not a child anymore, you're an adult." When I said that, he punched a hole in the wall and stormed out of the house. As days like this continued, finally, the incident occurred that broke the straw on the camel's back. One day, my grandmother noticed that $200 was missing from her wallet. In the beginning, I suspected my brother was behind this, but even though he was guilty about food, I didn't think that he would take it so far as to steal money from our grandmother. After discussing it with my parents, in the end, we decided that we should go to the police about it. As we were talking about the situation at the dining table, right at that time, my little brother came home. When he realized that we were trying to go to the police about the missing cash from my grandma's wallet, suddenly my brother started to panic. At that moment, I knew for certain that my brother was in fact the person who took the money, and I felt so upset about it that I became sad. It seemed that my parents felt the same way as me. When I looked over at my mother, she had tears in her eyes. I didn't have any energy left to be angry anymore, so I just quietly said to him, "Get out of this house, Stephen. Now." But in response, Stephen started yelling again.
This is all because you guys ignored me and went out to eat without me. This is all your fault. At this point, you're just bullying me.
Not only was he not apologizing, he started blaming the rest of the family, and we had all had enough. When my father started to lecture him once again about his greed with food, and how he even stole from his own grandmother, this time Stephen said,
When it comes to food, it's survival of the fittest. It's the same with money. That's Grandma's fault for being weaker than me.
When he said that, my grandma, who had been quiet this entire time, finally opened her mouth. What happened to you? When did you become like this? Even though you used to be such a sweet boy back then. My grandma said that under her breath, and we all saw a tear fall down her cheek. To follow up with her, my mother said, Ever since you came home, your grandma told me to make you your favorite stew, and a lot of it, because she was so excited that you were going to be coming home to us. And yet, look at you. As she said that, she looked down with sadness. Looking at the two of them, Stephen went quiet. I was wondering what he was thinking. But then he suddenly ran out of the house and disappeared somewhere. I tried my best to cheer up my mother and grandmother, and then I went into the kitchen and unlocked the fridge and made a quick dinner with whatever I could find. The four of us sat and had dinner together. This was our first dinner at home for the first time in a while, and it was delicious. But nobody in the family was smiling. The next day at dinner time, Stephen came home as usual. However, this time he wasn't empty-handed. In both hands, he had bags full of delivery food. And then with tears in his eyes, he walked over to our grandma and handed her $200 and said,
I'm so sorry, Grandma.
But much to our surprise, my grandmother didn't accept the money. Instead, she said, You need to get out of this house, Stephen. That was all she said to him. Both of my parents were in agreement, but then Stephen started crying. He started talking about how he was never able to eat much in the dorms, and that he knew it was wrong for him to be spending his money on hanging out with friends instead of contributing to the family. He opened up that he didn't know what to do with himself. But my parents were having none of it. They said that he can't be so spoiled, and that he thinks that he can get away with things like that. It's not going to pass as an adult. And they kicked him out of the house. Stephen was sobbing at this point, and he seems to really regret his actions. Seeing Stephen crying like this, I was reminded of the little crybaby that my brother always was, and I couldn't just stand by and watch. So I tried to say, Well, Stephen bought all this food anyway, so for tonight, why don't we at least eat it and have dinner together? When I said that, finally there were smiles back on everybody's faces. That evening, I forgot about my anger towards my brother, and for the first time in a long time, we enjoyed a family dinner together. And perhaps he finally understood, because this time my brother didn't try to touch anybody else's food. After that, Stephen did, in fact, move out of the house and go back to the dorms. He was given many stern warnings from our father not to spend all of his money on hanging out with friends. And Stephen promised to rethink his lifestyle and get himself back on track. 1 year later, my little brother successfully graduated from college and managed to secure a job. Once he moved out of the dorms and began living by himself, my brother became so mature that I almost thought he was a different person. Every now and then he comes back to the family house to visit, but he was clearly no longer so greedy about food anymore, and I was so relieved. On the day when my brother saw his mother and grandmother crying, he must have had a change of heart. The way that he values money also changed, and he seems to also be able to be more considerate of those around him. And perhaps, as an apology for how much trouble he caused us back then, every single time he comes to the family house, he always brings delicious food and snacks for us. And I started to look forward to his visits. After everything that happened, I'm just glad that my brother truly changed for the better. All I can do is pray that he'll never go back to being so greedy ever again.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.